Hey everyone, I'm Merrick and I make minis in HeroForge. This week's mini that we are looking at is my Inquisitor. He is an Order Cleric that I am playing in one of my D&D campaigns. So today we're gonna be talking about the inspiration behind the character, a little bit of a backstory, and also we are going to talk about how I made a character and what were the biggest challenges. Maybe let's start a little bit with the backstory for this character. As I said, I am playing him in one of my D&D campaigns. He's an Order Cleric. He is supposed to be an Inquisitor, and he is on a mission from his order to check some stuff out. I can't really talk about it too deeply because I don't want to spoil anything in case my party members watch or something. But let's say he's on a mission, you know, from the order that he serves. And he serves a god of justice. His name is Unseeing Mace. I didn't make the name. It was my DM who was like, hey, we have I have this deity, this deity, this deity, and this deity in my universe. Unseeing Mace is one of them. So I kind of wrote the lore for the Unseeing Mace and this god, so yeah. This is a god that represents the aspect of justice, and this justice in itself has the aspect of war and a kind of aspect of the law, you know? So the order that he serves is Order of Silver and Flame. The silver represents the Silver Inquisition, and they take care of the law part of the of the order for the justice. And then we have the flames, which kind of take care of the war part of the justice, you know. And the Silver Inquisition and the Blind Flames are a bit of an opposition towards each other, you know. They're kind of competing and they don't quite like each other, you know. So that's a little bit of a backstory for the order that he works for. I love playing clerics in D&D. Cleric is my favorite class because when you have a certain god that you align your character with, then you get the vibe, you know. If you're a death cleric, you have a death god that you follow, you kind of go with the death flow, you know. I don't know if it makes sense. Maybe the warlock players can relate with their patrons. I really love Order Clerics. They're really fun because, especially in the 2014 edition, if you combine it with the silvery barbs, I think it's really cool to use other people's reactions. It's pretty neat. I also have Merrick in the mini form, as you can see here. He looks pretty good, I think. This is the color stand-in option that they have in HeroForge, and I think this looks pretty good. Honestly, the stand-ins are pretty underrated in HeroForge, and I also just kind of find them practical because they can't really break easily, you know, so you don't have to care too much about the packaging. You just kind of throw it in your bag and you just forget about it, so you don't have to stress about your mini getting accidentally broken or something like that. So yeah, color standees quite underrated for HeroForge. Also, when I play Inquisitor Merrick, I talk like this, which may or may not be cringe. But if you find it cringe, perhaps you are the one who is the cringe lord. Personality-wise, Merrick is kind of he's a bit of an asshole, you know. The way he interacts with other characters in the D&D campaign, he's very often just kind of dismissive. He very often criticizes people for their actions or their inactions. And when I play D&D, I have a pretty big tendency to go the persuasion route for all of my characters. I don't know, I guess I'm just a sort of a person who likes persuading people more rather than intimidating them or lying. So yeah, but with this character specifically, with this Inquisitor, I gave him proficiency in intimidation, and I just kind of wanted to challenge myself to try to be as intimidating as possible, which is pretty difficult for me, I'll be honest. But the idea kind of is that I kind of wanted to like spin like intimidation, as in like it's not like, hey, I'm gonna kill you or something like that, but it's gonna be like a more of like an intimidation, as in like more of a doomsaying kind of style of roleplay, more of a like, hey, if you don't do this, something terrible will happen, so you should prevent that, and just try to like scare people in order to achieve like a good result, you know. And since he's like an Inquisitor, I wanted him to focus on the inquisitive part of the Inquisitor. Because like when you take Inquisitors in like media, they're usually associated with something like, with something bad, you know, something negative. So I wanted to have like an Inquisitor character who's still like a little bit terrifying, you know, to talk to. A sort of a character that's not likable, but I wanted him to be like a problem solver, you know, somebody who like thinks. I was kind of trying to capture that in this position right here. I kind of imagine that Inquisitor Merrick is probably investigating maybe some catacombs where it's just like very dark in there. He's got his light in his hand kind of to guide him, and he's just trying to uncover the clues of whatever cult is in these catacombs, or whatever is happening in these catacombs, you know. That's kind of like the idea for the pose. I also play with heavily armored feet on this character. Heavily armored feet is one of my favorite feats in D&D. I really love the buff that they have given it in the 2024 handbook. It's really awesome. So naturally I had him like from head to toes in complete play. In some way, I kind of imagine him also to be a bit of a politician, you know, that's trying to kind of scare his like allies into an action, into doing something, or they will just like regret that they never did it, you know. And Merrick is like this way. He's very critical and dismissive of other people because he grew up within the Silver Inquisition as a child. So to him, like all the solutions to his problems and anybody's problems is essentially just for people to side with the Order, you know? If they don't side with the Order, then they are being unreasonable in Merrick's mind, you know? Maybe now let's take a look at some of the earlier versions of Merrick. So this was my very first iteration of the character. As you can see, it was quite easy for me like to find all the armor pieces that I kind of just wanted to put together. And this mini right here that we are looking at, it was made without like any kid bashing, without any pro subscription, you know, so it's also just quite easy for you to make like these kinds of minis if you want to, you know. And while this mini does look pretty cool, the reason why I didn't go with this sort of a style, because it looks less investigative, it looks less inquisitory, and it looks more militaristic, you know what I mean? Like, here he kind of looks like a bannerman, but if that's not quite what he is. He's more of a like a detective, you know, like a religious detective. I mean, that's what Inquisitors are, right? This was my first version. With the colors, I kind of leaned in heavily into these like golden, red, and like silvery colors. My inspiration for the character was the Silencer from the Warcraft 3 Dota. He's also based on a Heroes of Might and Magic 5 Inquisitor unit. I think that was just kind of like my very first inspiration when I was working on Merrick. But then I also saw one design which was from Heroes of Might and Magic 6, which I really liked, so that was also a pretty big inspiration. For the helmet, I had essentially the same idea as Heroes of Might and Magic 5 and Heroes of Might and Magic 6. I just kind of wanted it to go tall. Maybe also another inspiration for this helmet were the XCOM 2 priests. They are also kind of known to have like this sort of a large helmet. And then I kind of just used shoulder pads which kind of accentuate the tallness. I also wanted him to have like some flame visuals. Color-wise, I imagined it to be more of a soft glow of a fire, and whenever there is a spark flying off of the fire, I kind of imagined that it would shine with silver. This was more or less the first iteration of the character, but one of the issues that I had with the with the colors is that they are too nice looking, I guess, or too bright, you could say. And then I had like the idea, since he does have like this sort of a flame, but maybe he is lighting up a path ahead of him. So here's the idea that I got. Essentially here I'm using like a gradient for the entire model. You know, the gradient doesn't touch this, unfortunately, but it is what it is for the free version. And this stuff right here, all of this is not affected by gradient. This is just painted. So even if you have like a free version of HeroForge, you can do this stuff, you know. You can see here the pink, that's essentially the gradient. And then here you can see that each individual part here is painted with this sort of a same color as the gradient to kind of like create an illusion of surrounding darkness. If you have a pro version of HeroForge, it is much easier to achieve this sort of an effect. We're gonna get to that later. One thing I also did with the helmet, as you can see, he's got like these sort of thingies here. These are essentially horns. These are not like part of this helmet. If I like take off the horns, you can see that the helmet looks a bit too technological for my taste. So I put here these horns to make it more fantasy rather than Warhammer 40k. One thing that I was frustrated about with Inquisitor Merrick was a shield. When I put in the free version, the shield, it was like centered on his back, and it was just kind of... It was touching the cape a little bit too much, and I didn't like that, you know? And Inquisitor Merrick is actually the reason why I bought myself the pro version, just so that I can like kit bash the shield slightly to the left side. I can show you. So essentially this shield right here is kit bashed. It can be moved and it can be also just moved back. One thing I didn't like was this part right here, but if you looked from this angle, you could see that the shield seems to be attached in some sort of an ungodly way that doesn't quite make sense, you know? So then I also added some scarves. I added this scarf right here, which I kind of stuck together with this scarf right here and this scarf right here. And I also used these tongues right here, and it kind of like reaches out from under this cloth and from under this armpit, and it reaches to the shield. I also kit bash these flames so that like they are pointing towards Merrick rather than like outside that we saw in the previous model. And another neat thing with the pro version is that you have like this sort of a light that you can enable. So if we go here, right here, I have this orangish light which kind of casts a glow on the armor very nicely here, but it also kind of nicely casts a glow on the bones below, you know, for a bit more atmosphere. And as for the decals, if you have the pro version, you're gonna also have like the entire body decal. For example, right here, I am using one decal to cover the cape, you know, and like the free version, I wasn't able to do this effect. So here I am covering the cape and the shield right here. This one covers the entire mini, obviously. This is what Merrick looks like if he doesn't have that sort of a effect on him, and this is what he looks like when he does have this sort of a darkness effect. As for this is just like a mace kind of thing, which is a symbol for his religion, so yeah, looks pretty cool. And here is essentially how everything looks together, you know. Here is one scarf, you know, here is another scarf, they kind of like connect to each other. The shield kind of just makes a lot more sense, you know, because it's like covered and you just assume that there is something beneath the cape that makes the shield attach itself to the armor. And you can see here a tongue, a painted tongue. I got this tip about using tongues as a sort of a thingy, which can like to attach stuff from one of the redditors from the HeroForge subreddits, which I went to them, and it's a really cool trick. It's like a sort of a suggestion that maybe there's something like wrapping around and underneath the cloth that kind of like holds these shields together. You can kind of see here the continuation, even though this thing is like, it's not connected, you know, these are like two separate tongues. Apart from the Mace symbology on this character, I also was trying to like add some sort of blind eye imagery, which is kind of seen here. Blind eye is a religious symbol for this character. Just kind of like went for more of an abstract eye, I guess, because I liked it more. The sort of a blindness I also wanted to show in this kind of like pearl-like gem in this mace, or a scepter, I guess is a more accurate thing to say. And also here the sort of a blind colored gem. And honestly, I think that's it for the character. I really like this mini, and I also really like playing Merrick. It's a pretty fun character to play. I guess the hardest boss fight he's had was to talk with a receptionist who didn't want to obey him, you know. So if you have any questions, let me know, and if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Alright, thank you so much, take care, and bye bye.